Many people are distracted by the noise around Abu Trika, Dadajo Remix, Kofi Boat, Agoni Pascal, and other names currently dominating conversations around fraud, extradition, and FBI attention. Those stories are loud, dramatic, and emotionally charged. But while the public focuses on fresh arrests and viral images, there is a far older, far deeper, and far more unresolved matter sitting quietly in the background. And that matter is Nana Appiah Mensah, known to the public as NAM1. The difference between NAM1 and the names trending today is not scale. It is time, politics, and unfinished business. NAM1's case never truly ended. It only went quiet. When the Menzgold saga exploded, it shook Ghana's financial confidence to its core. Ordinary people lost life savings. Families were broken. Retirees were pushed into despair. The anger was national, not partisan. What followed was a mix of arrests, court appearances, bail, media silence, political caution, and eventual fatigue. Over time, the country moved on. But the case itself did not reach a clean, satisfying legal conclusion for victims. It stalled, stretched, and slowly slipped out of the daily news cycle. That silence is what many mistake for closure. Under a stricter accountability environment, silence becomes liability. A future under the National Democratic Congress changes the entire atmosphere around unresolved financial crimes, especially ones with massive public impact. The NDC has consistently signaled, both publicly and internally, that economic crimes involving mass victimization will not be treated with kid gloves. Add to that the presence of Raymond Archer at the Economic and Organized Crime Office, a man whose reputation is built on methodical investigations rather than political comfort, and the tone becomes very different from what Ghana has seen in recent years. Raymond Archer does not chase headlines. He chases files. And files do not expire just because the public gets tired. The Menzgold matter left behind a long paper trail: bank transactions, gold trading claims, licensing questions, regulatory breaches, communications with state institutions, promises made to customers, contradictions between public statements and internal records. These things sit in documents, not in public opinion. When an institution like the Economic and Organized Crime Office decides to reopen or intensify scrutiny, it does not rely on social media outrage. It relies on evidence that already exists and evidence that was never fully tested in court. This is where NAM1's vulnerability lies. It is not in what people are saying now, it is in what was never resolved then. Under an accountability-driven administration, there is little tolerance for cases where thousands of citizens lost money and the final outcome appears inconclusive. The Office of the Special Prosecutor exists precisely for situations where economic harm intersects with regulatory failure, political influence, or institutional negligence. Even if a case was previously slowed, delayed, or politically sensitive, it can be revisited if new prosecutorial will exists. And that will is what changes under a government that wants to make an example of accountability. Honorable Sam George represents another layer of pressure. He is not a prosecutor, but he is a political force who understands public anger and is unafraid to amplify it in parliament and the public space. When politicians consistently frame unresolved financial scandals as moral failures of the state, it creates pressure that investigative bodies cannot ignore. Institutions may be independent on paper, but they operate within a political climate, and climates shape priorities. The question many people fail to ask is simple. If tomorrow, a fully empowered Economic and Organized Crime Office decides to aggressively pursue unresolved, large-scale financial losses, where does Menzgold fall on the list? It is not at the bottom. The argument that NAM1 has already faced the law is weak when examined closely. Facing the law is not the same as concluding the law. Bail is not exoneration. Court appearances are not closure. Public apologies are not restitution. And time passing is not justice. Victims still exist. Financial losses still exist. Documentation still exists. Under a stricter regime, unresolved restitution becomes central. If millions of cedis worth of value were lost, the state will want to know where responsibility ends and where recovery begins. If explanations given years ago do not align with current forensic reviews, that becomes a serious problem. Financial investigations age differently from street crimes. They get stronger, not weaker, as technology improves and records become easier to analyze. This is the same mistake many crypto fraudsters are making today, believing that complexity equals safety. It does not. Another uncomfortable reality is that public patience has changed. Ghanaians are no longer satisfied with vague assurances or prolonged legal dances. The rise of cases involving international cooperation, extraditions, and asset recovery has reset expectations. People now see suspects flown out, assets frozen, and prosecutions accelerated. That new reality raises a dangerous question for anyone with an unresolved legacy case. Why did this move fast? But that did not. That comparison alone can reopen old wounds. NAM1 also carries a visibility problem. He's not obscure. His name is permanently tied to one of the most painful financial episodes in Ghana's recent history. That makes him an easy reference point in any renewed national conversation about economic justice. When governments want to send signals, they do not pick small names, they pick symbolic ones. This does not mean guilt is assumed. It means scrutiny intensifies. And scrutiny, when it reaches a certain level, often leads to consequences. If the Economic and Organized Crime Office, under Raymond Archer, decides to conduct a comprehensive forensic re-examination of the Menzgold structure, it will not be a media exercise. It will involve asset tracing, transaction mapping, correspondence review, and cross-institutional cooperation. If discrepancies emerge between what was publicly claimed and what records show, those discrepancies become legal issues, not public debates. The Office of the Special Prosecutor would then step in where criminal liability is suspected, especially if regulatory breaches crossed into intentional misrepresentation or unlawful financial operations. Once that threshold is crossed, politics no longer matters. Process takes over. This is why comparing NAM1 to Abutrika or Kofi Boat is misleading. Their cases are active, immediate, and externally driven. NAM1's risk is structural and delayed. It sits at the intersection of unresolved harm, institutional memory, and political transition. Those are the kinds of cases that resurface when governments want to demonstrate seriousness. The most dangerous thing for anyone in NAM1's position is assuming that silence equals safety. Silence often means files are waiting. If an NDC government decides that the era of unfinished accountability is over, and if institutions are given full backing to act without fear or favor, then historical cases become low-hanging fruit. Not because they are easy, but because they are already documented. And in law, documentation is everything. So while the public watches handcuffs and airport transfers, the smarter analysis is to watch institutions, leadership, and political will. That is where the real danger lies. Not in trending names, but in unresolved ones. This is not a prediction. It is a warning based on how systems behave when pressure, power, and patience converge. And that is why Nana Appiah Mensah, whether people want to admit it or not, remains one of the most legally exposed figures in Ghana's financial history if accountability truly becomes non-negotiable. That is the reality many would rather ignore.